So congratulations on your baby. I remember when I was booking it, you had like an away message that's like, I'm preparing to welcome my baby Earthside, which I think is why actually I thought you were from California, because
Hey, totally.
because everyone in LA loves to use that phrase, like the earth side kind of welcoming of their newborn. And your baby arrived in March, you said?
Yeah, March 15th.
How
And
has how has
man,
life been since?
well, before before Jasper, which I was like BJ, AJ, no, that doesn't work. But
Uh-huh.
before Jasper, that's his name. You hear about birth and you hear about the love for a child, and I could conceptualize that, but I couldn't really understand it. But witnessing birth was, I mean, it was one of the most profound things I've ever seen, and so much reverence for women, mothers, the feminine, my partner, Jasper, as they negotiated that entrance and worked together on it. And yeah, that was, man, the miracle of birth. And so yeah, having him has, our midwife said to us, that a mother is a mother the moment that, like, procreation occurs. Not to, I'm sure other people are adoptive mothers, so not dismissing that, but that they experience it because they're already carrying the child.
Mm-hmm.
And a father isn't really experience fatherhood till he holds his child,
Mm.
because you're still at a distance to that relationship, right? You're not having the same level of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And that felt really true for me. There was like, when I finally held him, there was like all these moments of preparation and thought came together, and he just looked at me and made cooey sounds, and it was just, and he was covered in slime, and it was just, it was so, and meconium, like the poop that's in there. So
Mm-hmm.
I've never held something that had a little bit of poop on it and not been like, ugh. Instead it was, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah. But was it a moment, and maybe it's not a moment, but maybe it's like a period of time. And I've been exploring my thoughts on parenthood on
Hmm.
my show. I don't have kids yet, but at you being the father, and I actually in my relationship wouldn't be the one carrying my child. So when I read about parenthood, I end up identifying more with like books on fatherhood and things like that, because I do feel that I would be at a bit of a distance, and I just not having your child in like in the way that we understand mothers and their children. I
Right.
mean, do you feel connected to your son in the way that you read about? Does it click in a moment, or are you kind of falling into a rhythm with him? What does that look like?
Yeah, that part, which I think you're speaking to, is like the grief that you don't have the experience that the other person has. And there's actually, I think we can feel ashamed of that, or disconnected from that. And I was with that, that midwife gave language to something I was experiencing, but I didn't know I was experiencing, almost like an envy, but like a healthy envy. Yeah, the more I spend time with him, or like the other day, Kylie sent me. I was away doing speaking at a conference, and Kylie sent me a picture of him, and I just zoomed in on his face and got teary. So it has been interesting though to explore like the expectation that I should just have had this love that cannot be described, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I found myself a little distant from that, and maybe because I didn't know how to be that open or open up that much to what I was really experiencing, like maybe
Mm-hmm.
that I couldn't hold it. So yeah, it's a great question, because I have experienced that, and I'm sure every person is different, because there are certainly mothers that don't feel connected to their children right away, and fathers that maybe never do, or don't as well, and any space in between there. And I think just allowing it, but also leaning into the edges of the unfamiliar, and asking questions like you're asking. They're such good questions.
Did you always want to be a parent? Was that always a desire you had?
Yeah, I did. I always wanted to be a dad. I always liked kids. I'm 44 though, so I was like, I mean, I was still really committed to doing it, But there probably was a line where I would have crossed and been like, "Meh, I mean, we made it this far. Life's pretty good without thinking about a child. I have a
Yeah.
dog. That's a lot of I have a partner. But yeah, I've always wanted kids. Have you?
I have always been open to it. I've never felt like a certain yes, and I've never felt like a certain no. Right now, my partner, we have an age gap, and she is 37 and she's very eager to start a family and have kids. And I know that she's always wanted to be a mother, and I also know she's experiencing something like biological that I'm not experiencing right now. Like, I really
Mm-hmm.
feel like she feels the pressure of a clock.
Yeah.
And I'm doing my best to separate my desire around children from like the decision around it, because I can't really get clear when I'm in this gridlock of like, I'm going to say I want to have a kid and like I want to say yes so that I can stay in the relationship. Like it
Right.
gets really muddled, and I'm also 29, and it's just been I never thought I would be thinking about kids at this point in time. But the conversation around it has been, it started earlier because of the relationship I'm in. And I don't want to say, I need to say, I get to say yes for like the right reasons if I choose to say yes. So talking to parents, especially parents of newborns, has been really interesting to me, hearing their experience and kind of when they felt ready or if they ever felt ready.
That's a good thought of like, are you ever ready? I certainly have way more skills than I did at 25, or 22. Like I'm kind of happy I didn't have one then. Although my kid would be 22. So that'd be pretty wild. But yeah, I have so many friends that had kids really younger, and now their kids are teenagers and older, and I'm just starting. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade it for the world, though. To have more relational self awareness. Although I think the things that I'm self aware about now are available to people much younger, like the conversation about relationships and how we show up is happening so much younger now because of
Oh
social
my God,
media,
I
right?
know. I know.
Like
It's
I
like
know young people
memes
asking
have helped
questions.
people.
Right, right, totally. Like people are asking questions that I never thought of when I was young. I listened to the podcast with Jewel and Joe Rogan.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 4 hours long. And I listened to the whole thing because her life story is bananas. She was like thinking about personal growth at like 18, 17.
Insane.
I was personally not. I was thinking about girls, sports, just that on repeat probably.
Yeah. What was your the turning point in that in doing that work for you?
Personal growth work I did prior to that was really about how to be a better salesperson. I was a sales rep in pharma, which is wild. It feels like a whole different world now,
Mm-hmm.
to look back and see what you come through and what you used to think and believe. But yeah, it was really about how do I influence behavior to sell more things. And so I was really very passionate about understanding human behavior, but it was really more from a manipulation perspective. And then when I had a relationship end in my late 20s, I was 27. That's when I was like, wait, how did I get here? Why am I not good at talking about my feelings, but I'm good at talking about everything else? Why did I get engaged when I didn't want to? That doesn't make any sense. What is going on here? And that, I mean, blew my whole world open because I started to
Wow.
ask questions, and questions I had been afraid to ask. So I just avoided them, which I think is a lot of us till it's not.
What was that story, getting engaged when you didn't want to? I mean, what do you even mean by that?
Yeah, I was dating a really incredible woman. We met in college. So I was kind of like living the exact story I was taught: get married by a certain age, have kids by a certain age, get a certain type of job. I was exactly that. Like, I couldn't have cut it anymore. Went to college at the specific age, did a degree in finance. How practical. I didn't even like finance. My favorite course in university was were all my psych options,
Mm-hmm.
but yet I didn't pursue that. It makes no sense. But because business was always celebrated, it was either business like accounting, finance, medicine, you know, uh, all the standard things that we
Yeah.
get sold. And then when I got engaged, I really just felt the pressure to get engaged. It was like everyone else was getting engaged around us. A lot of them had been together less time. We were this specific age. I was right on time for all the things I'd been taught.
Right.
And I didn't want to get engaged, and I didn't know why. But in the pursuit of understanding why I didn't, what I mostly came up against was, you're just afraid of commitment. That's
Right.
normal. You're a man. You're just afraid of commitment, which obviously that could be anyone's experience. But I thought, wow, that's in hindsight, what I think is so fascinating is we want emotionally intelligent men. But yet, when I was demonstrating emotional curiosity, I was told that I didn't actually feel how I felt,
Mm-hmm.
and that it
Yeah.
was labeled by other people, which is also my responsibility to take ownership over my feelings. But I got engaged. She was everything I thought I wanted. And so that was really confusing for me, because I wanted to be with someone like her, but I didn't want to get engaged or marry her. But I didn't know why, because that didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so I wrote on a forum called, it's not available anymore. Frick, I wish it was, so I could read like my post and all the responses.
Uh-huh.
But it was called The Runaway Bride. And it was a website that was someone who had left a marriage and then survived and thrived. And then it was all these other people exploring. I'm not sure if I want to get engaged. I'm not sure I want to get married. And it was this really safe place because no one knew me.
Yeah.
And I realized in that experience that sometimes the worst people to ask for advice from are the people who are closest to you, because they're going to be most impacted by your choice.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to project onto you all the beliefs they have about relationships, the fears they have about people leaving them, or they're not leaving someone. So they're afraid if you do, they're going to see a deeper mirror to their own
Mm-hmm.
choices. So I asked these strangers, like, here's my circumstances. What do I do? Like, do you have good questions? And they had great questions. The first question I got asked was, if she left you tomorrow, would you be okay? And I thought, oh my God, yeah, I'd be relieved. And I do think there is a part that is healthy relating where you actually know you're okay if you're not in a relationship. But this
Right.
was more of like a deeper, they would have made the choice I was afraid to make kind of feeling.
Yeah.
The second question was, could you imagine what it would be like waiting for her at the altar, whatever your altar is? And I was like, oh, that gave me anxiety.
Right.
And then the last question was, could someone else love her better?
Mm.
And that's the one that really hit me, because
That like makes me want to cry just hearing it.
I know, because so much of my process before that was very self-oriented. Like, what do I do? Delayed fear, all these things. But my soul just being like, you need to end this relationship. You don't know why
Yeah.
yet. You don't know why yet. You don't know why yet. We're not going to give you the answer yet. We're not going to give you the answer yet.
It's torture.
It is. And staying suspended in that space because we're afraid of all the cultural beliefs that say you're a failure if your relationship ends, or you leave, then you're the villain, you know,
Yeah.
and all the shame that occurs for people who get divorced or break up with someone. And I thought, well, now I very much, my perspective is like, sometimes the most loving thing to do is actually to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get to know why often till you leave, and
Later.
then your life blossoms and takes a, I mean, that's what inspired me to learn about relationships and then teach them, because I felt no one was telling the truth about relationships. I was angry. I was like, why didn't no one tell me relationships end, even though it was so obvious? But it shows you the bias that we have. But that's where the answer to that question, with can someone else love her better, was yes.
Yeah.
And then of course the follow-up question is, do you want to? Like, are you the
Yeah.
one who wants to step up? Because I think a lot of the times in long-term relationships, we can take our partners for granted. And then that's just a great check-in question. But I didn't want to love her better. And I didn't know why, but I knew that she was worthy of that love. And so was I. And, and someone desiring to show up to that level. And I didn't desire it. I mean, in hindsight now, I can see that I was terrified of being chosen. I was terrified of being betrayed. I was terrified, there's a lot of things that weren't resolved. But when I finally left, I did feel like 1,000,000 pounds were lifted off my
Mm.
shoulders. And I mean, it put me on a pathway of being like, I'm going to learn everything about relationships so
Right.
that I don't repeat this. So it was very self oriented first. I think, like all missions, they're like, how do I solve this for me? And then you see that other people need that solved. And you're like, oh, I'll just teach from what I've experienced and what I know and what I'm learning. And then you're kind of like a chapter ahead of some people and a chapter behind other people. And that's been very much my life since then, has been just living my relational life out loud in a lot of
Mm.
ways while still maintaining a space for what's sacred for my partner and I and our family.
And when you said to yourself, I'm not going to repeat this, I'm going to learn everything I can so that I'm resourced to kind of choose and live differently. Well, do you not repeat it? I mean, I feel like I've told myself that 100 times. Like, I'm not going to let this happen again. I fall in love with people too soon. Then I get to know the person 6 months in. I'm like, I'm in love with someone who acts like this. Like, I,
Yeah, welcome, right? Welcome to
you
the
know,
club.
I totally identify with becoming like really self-important during a breakup. I mean, historically, like I've always looked at my partner. If I've kind of had this gut feeling that it was time for the relationship to end, I would tell myself, they'd be devastated. Their life would be ruined without me. When really, I'm just not giving either of us permission to live kind of fuller, more expansive lives. But what is the first thing you do out of that relationship, like on that quest to get clear about how you want to move through the world in relationship or not, or on your own?
Well, there's no relational experience that's not co-created. And I think when we can sit with the truth of that, that even if you left a narcissist, you were still part of the relationship with the narcissist, you know, and
Yeah.
the alcoholic, the drug addict, if we are those things as well, we need to be able to be self-reflective and hold the shame of the truth. I think the word shame, which is a toxic emotion, but is also a healthy response to the awareness of poor behavior and toxic behavior and behavior that's not constructive or conducive to healthy relating. So we have to be with the truth of who we are and be with the truth of how we co-created our relational outcomes. That's not to say that we can't have experienced, because a lot of the time what you hear in response to saying something of that sort is it's victim blaming. But in the conversation of telling someone that they need to take responsibility for the circumstances that they find themselves in, it's not negating the experience of victimization. It's saying, what are we going to do with the awareness that we have of the patterns that we have relating? So that's the first part, is like when you go through a breakup, you can make that be, and I was just sharing about this. A lot of us get stuck in this place where we're trying to prove to the world and to our ex how much they broke us, how much
Yeah.
they hurt us. And look at us now. We can't open our heart again. I
I'll
can't
never
even
love
enjoy.
again.
Right, right. And you hear that line a lot. Like, I don't trust people. I don't. And you know what we're spending the time doing is we're wasting our energy and we're keeping ourselves in a prison of blame. And the other person doesn't even think about it. They're like out hanging out in Cancun, drinking a Mai Tai with their new partner. And we're on social media quoting Taylor Swift or Adele, like
Totally.
I say all that because instead of proving how love broke you, prove how love transformed you. Prove how a breakup can actually be the catalyst to the first time that you choose yourself, that you're liberated, that you're in your power, that you use your voice. I don't think there is a more potent vehicle for change and transformation than a breakup.
Yeah.
And if we're willing to sit with that level of recognition of power, and we step out of the like, look what happened to me, which is totally fair, and it's normal for humans to go into that. It's just not for normal. It's not normal for humans to live in it. And we think we're gaining power by proving how broken it made us, but we're actually a siphon for it. It's flowing right through us and out of us.
Right. Well, I mean, it's so true that like I had on Amy Chen a few weeks ago who wrote Breakup Boot Camp, and she actually runs these like breakup boot camp courses. But that breakups, they are this sort of like fertile ground for transformation. But I also think about how every time I was going through a breakup, I like couldn't believe the level of pain I was in. I mean, like
Oh,
easily the most
right.
painful periods of my life, you know?
Yeah, that grief is so important because often the grief of a breakup is, especially if we haven't really touched grief that much or held it or learned from it, it will be old grief showing up as new grief too. All the unprocessed decay of pain of not being chosen as a child, of not feeling important, of not feeling loved. That all comes up in the tearing away of attachment. And, you know, I think about this a lot, that we often try to save people from the feelings we don't know the value of.
Mm.
So if I know the value of grief and you come to me and you say, my heart's broken, I am going through the most devastating heartbreak, my answer isn't, what do I do to make you not feel that?
Right.
Mine is, how do I help you hold that? How do we change? How do we convert that? How do we sit with that? How do we be with that? How do we be curious about it? Because there's some is so potent. It's like the roots of a tree. You're not going
Mm-hmm.
anywhere. It demands to be felt. And it is a beautiful thing. It's just that we so often don't know how to navigate it and alchemize it and transform it, that we stay stuck in it and we become depressed. And there's ways through that, and that's why I think guidance is important. Like, I have a breakup course too, and it's about just taking 5 weeks of total responsibility and transformation
And
and
I'm gonna mute the name of the
using.
other breakup course. Don't worry.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Amy's
I'm
stuff is
just
great.
I'm just joking.
I'm like, what other course? But yeah, whatever vehicle people are drawn towards, that's the thing, is like, if we can actually step into the space of that grief. Francis Weller has this quote where he says that the soul likes to dwell in the darkness. And when I was going through my breakup too, I thought a lot about that. I was sober in the breakup. It was the first time I'd been sober through a breakup. And I could feel myself like being more connected to my soul than I ever had. But the vehicle of that connection was grief. And
Mm.
that was paradoxical and weird for me. I didn't know how to hold that like, here I was blown open, and here I was more connected to the totality of the human experience.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'm trying to think where I want to go with it because I have a lot to say. But
Say it all.
I
Say it
I'm
all.
I'm thinking also about a quote from your Instagram about navigating the difference between self-abandonment and compromise, which is
Mm.
a conversation I get into in relationship in general on smaller scales and then ultimately sometimes on larger scales. And what I'm forgetting what exactly you said, but I also think it's best to share it here. Like, what do you see as the difference between those two things, or at least how to kind of suss out the difference between them?
Yeah, they're powerful thought processes, because so often what has been taught to people, especially people pleasers, is that self abandonment is compromise. So if I give up my feelings, my needs, my desires, my wants, and I become a self that is all about helping others, which, if you think about it, is ultimately the message that most women receive. And anyone who grew up in a home where they had an alcoholic parent, an addict parent, a narcissistic parent, even someone with a chronic illness, a brother or sister you had to take care of, someone whose needs the family oriented around, or whose reactivity the family oriented around, then what happens is we basically erase ourselves in order to survive, right? We make it about other, and that
Right.
becomes a superpower. And then if you look at sort of the language we use about that, it's like, I just love and love and love. I take care of people. Like, this is what I do. And what happens is there is an absence of self. So the difference is that self-abandonment means the self has to leave the relationship in order to maintain it. So people who have self-abandoned put the connection to other ahead of connection to self. But all healthy relationships should require a connection to other that actually facilitates and also has space for a connection to self. That can be a
Right.
totally new skill for people. They could be like, wait, what? So if I'm in a relationship, I can still have needs? Yes, actually, to be in a relationship, you must have needs, and they must be being met on some level. And there's a lot of righteousness that can come from getting rid of your own needs to take care of other people.
Right. Yeah.
And that's protective, because then we go, well, I'm just altruistic. I'm just empathic. I'm a highly sensitive person. And all those things can be true. But if you are any of those things, you need more boundaries, and that's because what that does is it develops a self. Boundaries draw a circle around who you are. So compromise is expansive to the relationship. So if, let's say, you and I are in a relationship and you're like, I want to go do this school. I want to do this thing. I want to learn about this thing. And it's bringing us to a different city. And I'm like, well, I want to do this thing. And it's not in that city. And as a relationship together, we're like, okay, well, why don't we go do your thing first? Mine will be on hold, and we'll help support that. And then we can orient back to this other thing. Although I might experience loss, I might experience sadness, I might experience a bit of resentment, what will be communicated in our conversations and our connection is that this is in service of the connection. and the longevity of it. And I will feel expanded by it, which doesn't mean the absence of grief or anger. It just means that I know that what I'm doing is actually contributing to the expansion of both of us. It's a stretch for me. It's a stretch for you. It's a stretch for us. If it was self-abandoning, there would be deep resentment. There'd be anger. There'd be disconnection.
Yeah. I boundaries are so hard for people. Putting up boundaries and being able to communicate them, not just within your, like, let's say your romantic relationship, but just in relationships in general. Like, I feel like I see so many people in my life. I mean, I'm less afraid of confrontation than a lot of people. I think that's just a part of my personality, but I definitely still struggle with boundaries. But I wonder, like, what is like a low grade boundary work exercise for people, because you need to practice it, don't you?
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
do.
what is a good way? Have we come up with an exercise yet of like, this is a small way to install a boundary and like you can kind of work this muscle? Because it's terrifying for a lot of people. I mean, the fear
It
is
is.
you won't love me anymore, or I'll put this up and then you'll stay far away and I'll lose you altogether. And then who am I?
Yeah, it's putting in boundaries, especially if you've never had any and never witnessed any, is terrifying. Because of course, to be boundaryless is to put connection with other ahead of connection to self. So to hold on to a self and be in a relationship is often foreign for people. For a lot of people, holding on to a self and letting people in is the other, extreme of that.
Right.
Is
Right.
they don't know how to, they compromise relationship for self. And we often find ourselves in relationship with each other when we have this opposing way of being. It's like a cosmic joke, to our evolution, because both require the expression of their true needs and their true self in order to come together into a healthy relationship. So, when I think about practicing boundaries, the first thing is practicing voice. So one of the things that is really powerful, and there's a saying that the opposite of trauma is choice. And so this idea that when you start inserting choice, small choices, you actually start to experience on a nervous system level what it means to be in choice, to be deciding your day, your schedule, your way of being, who you're going to interact with. So that can be overwhelming if I'm like, okay, the first step of your boundary is you're going to tell your mom that you're not okay with her toxic feedback. Right. Like go right to the source,
Yeah.
But we don't start there. What we might start with is just keeping small promises to yourself. So let's say you have a ritual or practice where you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is you make your bed. That seems very benign. It seems like not a big deal. But why it is actually a big deal is if you do it every morning and it's so simple. Come on, all you got to do is slide your sheets up and puff the pillows. It takes a few seconds. But what happens is you're saying to yourself, when I commit to something, I show up. And you're actually starting to get out of reactivity mode and into proactivity mode. And you're starting to see that, wait, when I make a choice like that, I shape myself, I shape my day. And you start to trust yourself. So from there, and even at the same time, you could practice these little micro ones, which are like, you can have a friend say, oh, do you want to go out on Friday? Da, 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 da. You say, actually, I'm busy on Friday. Thanks so much for the invite.
I'm making my bed.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, you better be doing that in the damn morning. But yeah, that is like
I love that
such
answer.
a powerful way. And you could even say to your friend, if you have a really good friend, you could say like, listen, I'm practicing boundaries. I need you to support me in this practice. Here's what support would look like.
Mm-hmm.
And that way you're going to get what you need, because so many of us never say that. And then we
Isn't
feel
that
let down, blah, blah.
the best thing ever, is to direct someone about the support you need?
Right. Right.
Oh
Because then you
my
get it.
God. It changed my relationship with my parents. I can talk to my mom and say, listen, I don't need you to solve this for me. And I don't need you to panic for me. I just want you to listen to me and then tell me you love me. Like, it's so amazing. Like, you could totally help people, help you, help me. You know what I mean? Like, it's amazing.
I totally
and I
know
think
what you mean.
it goes in hand with, the way you're talking about these commitments we make to ourselves and showing up for ourselves. Like, another amazing, and by the way, you need to follow Mark's Instagram at Create the Love. It's the best. It's like one of the best pages on Instagram. But you said
Thank you.
self-love sets the standard for what you will allow into your life. And I love that idea. I love that idea that like when we commit to ourselves, when we acknowledge ourselves, when we see ourselves, like it's not about other people recognizing you or disappointing anyone else. It's just about sourcing that in your world. Like, look, I show up for myself. Look at how I value myself. I think there's so many little ways that like I even like have the even me, a guru. No, but like I can let myself down or just these little things that it's like even if no one's around, like I can see that like I chip away at my own value. I chip away at my own integrity when like
Right.
I say I'm gonna do something and I don't.
Yeah, those are small too, and it's everyone's prone to it because having a certain belief system or a certain sense of self-esteem is a collection of choices. So, if you want to look at why you feel the way you do about yourself, just look at what you choose, because ultimately you are what you choose. So
Mm.
you could have this idea like, I want a beautiful, amazing relationship. And, I remember working with someone who I was like, do you want an amazing relationship? And she was like, yes, I do. And I was like, no, you don't. And she was like, yes, I do. And she was getting mad at me. And I was like, if you truly did, you would choose it, but you're not choosing it. She was choosing totally unavailable people, toxic people. And it's not to dismiss that the deeper desire of her soul was to get that and the desire, but there was, if she kept choosing people who were unavailable and toxic, there's no way that belief could actually be reinforced. What the true belief that's being reinforced at the basis of choice is, I'm not worthy of that thing. What I'm worthy of is this garbage, is this low standard, is this, and no offense to the guys she was choosing, but they were low fucking standard. They were not people that were going to contribute to what her vision was. And so if your
Right.
choices are not in alignment and moving you towards what your vision is, they're either keeping you the same or shrinking you, then you got to get rid of them. And the unfortunate part of that, although very fortunate in the long run, is that usually means a lot of the choices we make about food, about substances, about booty calls, about all these different things. And not saying that even a booty call is bad, but if it's not in alignment with the relationship that you want to create, then it's actually not contributing to who you are and what you want. And it really is that simple, which we like to complicate, but it really is
I mean,
that
it
simple.
sounds so clear when you're saying it. I mean, it sounds so straightforward, but why do we resist closing that gap so vehemently?
Yeah, because it puts us in the unfamiliar. I used to think that the reason that we couldn't choose somebody who was available was because we didn't believe we were worthy of it. And while I think there is a small element of truth to that, I really think that at the basis of the lack of belief in availability or receiving love is actually we don't trust ourselves with other. So I don't trust myself in who I'm choosing. I don't trust that
Mm.
if I'm faced with the choice between connection or integrity and values, that I'll have my own back. I don't trust that you won't betray me. I won't trust that you won't leave me. I don't trust that you won't hurt me. And so because we have this lack of trust, it shows up in making choices that actually just reinforce the wound. The irony is that if we fear abandonment, our behaviors will recreate abandonment. If we fear being rejected, our behaviors will recreate rejection because we have to learn. And that's, we were talking about, why do patterns keep persisting? Because till we actually learn the core behaviors at the basis of the pattern, we will repeat patterns till we learn the lesson. And some of us will spend our whole lives repeating that till one day, we're just like, that's enough. And we don't have to wait till enough is enough because it hurts so much. We can just wait till enough is enough because we decide. When the book Power versus Force, David Hawkins talks about this hierarchy of the energetics of emotion. And the lowest one, I believe, is shame. And then you move into anger. But anger isn't bad. It's that, and shame isn't bad if it moves you to anger. And anger isn't bad if it moves you to courage. So there is this evolution that occurs. So you can have shame about the choices you're making, but then you alchemize that into anger. I can't believe I made those choices. I learned that from my family, culture, Disney, whatever. And then you're like, fuck yeah, I'm making a different choice. Now you're encouraged. And then you get into the place where you forgive what you learned. And that's, now you're in unconditional love. And so you're at a state of peace. And if we can kind of try to keep ourselves there, And that sounds sort of esoteric from an energetic perspective, but let's just think about it from a biological perspective. If you're making poor choices that are high conflict, you're in a high state of inflammation. So if you're in a high state of inflammation because your nervous system is in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, then you're actually going to get leaky gut. You're going to probably trigger immune issues. You're probably going to trigger hypertension, all these different things. And if you just start to make different choices, and this is validated by the research, that if you are making choices that calm your nervous system and you have good boundaries, the longest running study on well-being is the Harvard well-being study. And what they saw was that your greatest predictor of your health at 80 is the quality of your relationships at age 50, not romantic, any kind. And so we can both get into the spiritual esoteric
And
language.
that's of your health at 80?
That's your health.
Your physical health.
Yeah, it wasn't your cholesterol. It wasn't anything like that. It was the quality. Do you have someone you can depend on? Do you have someone you can share life with? Doesn't have to be a romantic partner. It could be a friend. It's just that you have a social circle. And, as we have moved to a more social network, but I mean more digitally, that gives the illusion of connectedness. But what we really need is to create connection within our cellular, not digital, but literal cellular spaces, so that, we break bread, we have conversation, we hold each other. When you're going through a divorce, your community doesn't say, I hate you, I can't believe you're going through a divorce. True community says, we love you. Teach us what you learned from your relationship. Like, imagine if we took someone.
I want to live on like a kibbutz with you and your family.
Right? I don't know what a kibbutz is. It sounds good.
You don't? It's like the communal housing set up in like Israel. It's like people live on kibbutzes. There's like many houses, and there's it's just a certain form of communal living where, for example, you and your wife one night would be responsible for cooking dinner for everybody, but then, the other 29, 30 days of the month, you guys would just enjoy the dinner that every other couple. I mean, it's beautiful. I like the idea of being in community, and it's good for you. So this is my pitch to move in with you guys.
I'm in. Like, all we need is a kibbutz. Can we do it in like a rural place somewhere?
Yeah,
in the forest,
maybe Idaho or something like that. But
Idaho's the best. I mean, all these rural. I think that's why people are being so drawn back to things like farm, land, community, because there is, a eradication of that community base. And to be fair, most of our culture and our communities are not mature enough to welcome in wounding, to not shame people instead. And, like really healthy communities don't shame. They say, tell us, we're not going to tolerate certain behaviors, but tell us what you need from us. You're loved, you're safe. It's not about you, and
yeah.
Gosh, could you imagine experiencing when you go through a breakup that someone just immediately, the community says, like, we got you, we got your back, you're so loved. Like, I'm sure for someone listening, that's something they crave. And, Francis Weller he's a psychotherapist. He has this great saying where he says, we spend our lives seeking belonging. And at some point, we have to become a place of welcome. And to me, that is everything. Can we go from living our life from our wounds, where we're chasing, and then we become the place where other people are looking for? That is maturation. That's adulthood. I wish I learned that way younger, but it's never too late,
That's gorgeous.
to turn around, right? Like, imagine just think of the energetic feeling of saying, I'm no longer going to pursue my life from wounding, and I'm going to become a place of healing.
Ugh, I feel like so much of this comes back to just what you said at the beginning, which is sitting with pain. Because when we can sit with pain, we can accept things, and then we don't have to have our defenses up, and there's no place for judgment or you just get to be. And
right.
It's so hard to sit with our pain because it's uncomfortable. And I see the things that like I'll grab to kind of band-aid myself over instead of just like being in it for a second and knowing and trusting that you'll survive,
Right. And think, like, when you're exploring, like you were talking about, exploring those subjects with your partner about having children and what that means, when the relationship can hold all the truths and it not mean I don't love you, or I can't choose you, or because of course people's fear come up, especially if we're in a scarce state, as opposed to being like, how do we make the decision together that is about bringing this soul into the world in a way that if that works and that's aligned for me currently, it is an amazing, what an opportunity. And if it isn't amazing, what an opportunity. That there is no right or wrong, that there just
Right.
is what is being called through for both of you. When we moralize it, or we do it from this place of scarcity, like my wanting to have a kid is a better thing than your not wanting, or my not wanting is my individuation and yours is whatever it is. But if we could just be with both truths and there not be any love lost, then now the truths can alchemize together and we can come forward in whatever way feels best for both our souls.
Right. And it's calling me to another thing I read from your page, which was about how can we reframe this idea of like, what am I going to lose? Like, what's the trade-off here, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I say yes to this or if I say no to this, I'm at risk of losing whatever it is, this job opportunity, whatever. When instead, the idea of like setting something aside and saying, if I don't have this or if I can let go of this, I get to go all in on this. Like, I can go really big on this right now. And like, what an amazing like headspace to like feel into things energetically of like, I'm not always at loss. I'm not a victim of just like losing things or saying
Right.
sorry and goodbye constantly. It's like such a perspective switch.
Well, what an opportunity to get to where we were taught limited thinking, Because I remember when I heard that, I forget where I heard that. It might have been in The Comfort Crisis, the book. I remember quoting it when I shared that because my mind was blown. Like this idea that there is something you lose and you're not focusing, that now all your energy can go into creating something fucking phenomenal. And because we're so caught up in like, what will people think? What about this? What about that? And your soul's like, who gives a fuck? Like, just create, just become, like, step fully into your passions. Like, that is more healing than anything. Ferocity and passion for like creating something from a place of love and commitment to self and whatever that is. Yeah, it's such a perspective shift. And it's also filled with grief. And the reason it's filled with grief is you will also feel the life that you have not lived with that perspective. And that's actually important. That's potent because that's where you now create from. Think of like all the most powerful music we listen to. It's usually about love. It's usually about loss. If it's country music, it's about trucks. But it's about all these. I've been listening to more country now that I'm, in Idaho because
Of course, culturally.
Yeah, right. Like when in Rome, or when in Coeur d'Alene, I laughed because I was like, Kyle, all these songs are about beer, mud, trucks, and love. And they're actually, I'm like, I remember listening to like Garth Brooks when I was young, and like Alan, I forget, not Alan Watts, but I love Alan Watts, Alan Jackson. And now I just laugh. I'm like, man, country music's a trip. I love it.
It is funky and fun.
Better than some of the like WAP and stuff. I'm like, man, how do we have this kind of music now? Someone was saying like the music you listen to is really programming your mind, and I was very resistant.
And it's the biggest sign of health at 80 years old is actually the music. The music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I love. Like, what were they listening
Elvis,
to?
Probably something like that.
You think Elvis?
He had evil hip shakes. The Christians didn't like that.
Oh God!
They said he moved his hips in an evil way.
They blurred them out.
Did they actually blur them?
Yeah, on late night you couldn't see it.
It's so dumb. It's like someone making a thrusting motion is going to make us all want to thrust. It's so ridiculous. Like that was science, by the way.
Also, like it's okay to thrust.
Exactly. You should be air humping all the time.
It's like you have one life.
Yeah, right. One life. YOLO. Thrust away, YOLO.
I also love, I love the way, I mean, it's in your handle. Create the love. I like the word create. I think like people don't use it enough. And like, I like coming from that like, generative space. And a lot of the things that like your page is in conversation about, and I guess your page is you, but we live in a time of social media. So I'm just kind of talking to you to to interview your Instagram page is like you don't fall into the perfect relationship. You don't meet the perfect person, but this idea that like you get to co-create these kind
Mm.
of brilliant magical things. You're a part of that, right? Like you're
Yeah.
not picking it off of a shelf. I think
Th-
like the agency in that is amazing.
and highly requires such a high level of responsibility, which, you know, I keep coming back to, is like when you're willing to step into that level of agency, the terrifying thing is you can have everything you want.
I know.
That
I just
is
have
the
to stop
terrifying.
blaming everyone.
Right. But to, and blame, that's why I said blame is such a prison,
Yeah.
because it's,
Yeah.
you don't, it's not your fault for where you are, but you don't get to go anywhere, because that's the trade-off. Blame is like having cement shoes. You know, you're not going anywhere. But that idea of creation came to me because I remember listening to Stephen Covey, who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And in it, he talked about someone asking him, like, you know, my wife and I are not blah, blah, blah. I can't remember the details. But he said, how do I bring this back alive? And Stephen said, love her. And he said, no, you're not hearing me. Like, this isn't working. Da, 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 da. And he's like, love her. Love is a verb. Love is what you choose. Love is actions. And I didn't really understand that when I first heard it. But now I totally do, because a relationship requires investment. It requires presence. Uh, we have such a shortage on presence now, because what social media does is it monetizes your attention. And so what happens is it's, while it's monetizing your attention, it's also siphoning the energy and vitality from your relationships and your presence to your life, from nature, from all these things that actually revitalize you. Someone's making billions of dollars away from that vitalization. And I see that with the awareness that I have on Instagram, you know, but what are people getting from the energy we're putting into the world? And when we can actually start taking that level of creation, which, when I think of the message that generally comes from religion, is this idea that, and this is fascinating to think, that really ultimately, if your relationship with God, or whatever you want to call it, is a direct relationship with other, spirit, whatever, earth, what religion did is it made itself the broker. Like, you need us to get connected to this thing. Just like when you think about love, I'll often hear from someone, well, when I fall in love, I just feel good. Like, love is this place where I get to be my best self, and like I'm excited about the world, and I'm funnier, and I'm all these things. And what we don't realize is that what relationship did and what other did is it gave us access to something that already exists within ourselves. But what we do is we fall in love with the method. We fall in love with the mechanism. I got meditation, and then I felt otherness, or I felt oneness. I felt God. Well, you just felt yourself, but meditation was the vehicle. So you fall in
Right.
love with the vehicle. Just, I remember Ram Dass talking to his teacher Maharaji, and Maharaji said, why do you do so much LSD? And he said, I do it. When I do it, I get to sit with Christ. And Maharaji said to him, well, why don't you just become Christ? And Ram Dass was like, well, shit, that's actually a good point. And I say all of this because when you can be with the truth that what you feel and what you want in your life is really just in the simplicity of your presence and your choices, and committing to that with such ferocity, like, what do you want to create in your life? How do you want to be remembered? What are you not willing to give up in order to get that? And usually it's a vice. Usually it's a wound. Usually it's something that's holding us back. Usually it's blame. Usually it's victimization. Usually it's an addiction. But it's something that's holding us back from really being present to the possibility of our lives. That was a
Mm.
really long answer.
No, that was such a good answer. That was an incredible answer. I can't get over the cancer of phones, though. I'm
It's such a strange paradox to hold,
like
really.
when you were saying, I think about how people sign off on emails sometimes, and they're like, I'm gonna disconnect this weekend, and it's like, no, you're gonna connect. Like
You're right. I never actually thought of that. That's true.
you're
That's a good
not
point.
disconnecting from anything. Like you're gonna actually go
That's
live
so
your
good.
life. You know what I
Wait,
mean?
you're
Like
gonna actually connect.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
going to connect. And like I see it in myself when, like, I see something beautiful outside and I'm like, that looks like a photo, like, or like my reference point for the world is artificial. Like we are, and I mean, I didn't have Instagram in like high school, thank God, but like I got it in my early 20s, and just like the way it's siphoned off our attention and our energy, and like just hearing you say these things that I know to be true, but you say them back to me, they're not like complicated
No.
ideas. Like it's really simple. This idea of like, I'm going to be present and commit, and like I'm going to just show up to those commitments because I can see that these things that I'm committing to create my vision or create it's, I don't know, it's just amazing. And you're really amazing to talk to, and you've clearly read
Thank you.
lots of phenomenal books that have kind of added to your encyclopedic knowledge of, you know, and awareness. Like, what are some of the texts, your favorite texts for people to take a look at or start with?
My God, there's some that I revisit a lot. And those are kind of my like go-tos. So the first teacher I ever discovered that really spoke to me, and it was when I was going through that breakup at 27, was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Which, yeah, you're like, yeah, that's like an essential. I remember I would ask people when I was a rep, motivational speakers would come in to the company, and I would ask every single one of them and everyone I admired, what's the best book you've ever read that changed your life? And Man's Search for Meaning kept coming up. And when my engagement ended, I remember reading that book. I was traveling, and I remember understanding, I had heard a speaker once say that had quoted Viktor Frankl, and it was a speaker who was speaking to palliative care patients. And it was that to live is to suffer, but to survive is to find meaning in your suffering. And when you learn about Viktor Frankl's journey, you're like, holy shit, here's a man in the ultimate pain, like ultimate loss. And yet he is witnessing people in the same circumstances, finding meaning. And that no one being able to take that away from them, despite being in these camps, and that was so inspirational to me. I just remember being like, here I am living very unconsciously, not on purpose, but because I've been hypnotized into this is what a good life is. This is what it means to be a man. This is what it means to have value, masculinity, etc. And Alan Watts says that to awaken is to awaken from the hypnosis. And I've been thinking a lot about this, that if you really want to be available to everything that's possible for you, you just have to live with the possibility that everything you're taught is wrong. Not everything you're taught is wrong, but you have to live with that possibility, because then you can still be curious to the messages you were sent about who you are. And like, imagine if you don't have a name. You're not Ali. I'm not Mark. You know, that we get to just be at that level. We're just a couple souls in some meat sacks flying through this plane, going pretty fast, actually, which is pretty wild. And a little dot in the middle of a fucking universe. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. When someone tells me this is how the world works, I'm like, how could you fucking possibly know? Like, there's no way anyone can actually know. And when you get to that level of both overwhelming possibility and creation, I'm just like, man. So that was a long tangent on that. Viktor Frankl's book. Alan Watts has an audio series. The first one is called, I think it's called Does It Do You or Do You Do It? And it's just a 4-part series. And then he has another long, like 12 CD, which no one uses those anymore, but 12 disc collection that's called Out of Your Mind. And then there's a Ram Dass one that I come back to a lot, and it's 10 lectures, and it's on Audible, and it's called Experiments in Truth. And it's 10 of his top lectures, and they're just so good. Alchemy of Initiation by Francis Weller was really powerful. The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. Holy bananas. That so good. The Coddling of the American Mind is one of the best books I've read in the last 5 years too.
Wow.
Alchemy of Initiation, for sure, one of the best spiritual, psychological teachings. The Coddling of the American Mind is about the circumstances of our society today, that we cannot have conversations that are hard, and we have very little emotional capacity for disagreement, and how that was created through helicopter parenting, smartphones, how kids grew up with parents who didn't allow them to experience uh, any challenges. And so, as college students, they didn't know how to exist in a world that wasn't just accommodating their belief system. And so, it's a really profound book, and how the technology actually has a much deeper impact on girls and women than boys. Not to say
Mm,
it doesn't have it on boys, but because when women have social challenges, they tend to socially punish,
mm,
as where boys tend to choose violence or aggression, right?
mm-hmm,
So their conversation, which I might butcher a little bit, it's Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt are the authors, and they talk about how if you were to give a boy a gun, if you gave everybody guns, boys and girls, the boys are more likely to use them. So girls try to commit suicide more than boys, but boys are more successful, which is not necessarily a good thing, but it's because they choose more aggressive means. Um, if you then think like, okay, well, girls use social punishment, bullying, that kind of stuff. And I think every woman can understand that, and most men can understand that, that that's true. When you're young, you witness that. Social costs, like trying to cut them out of circles, etc.
mm-hmm.
And there's no hierarchy to this. This is just based on social research. If you were to plan to give a girl a perfect weapon for that, it's a
Social
social
media.
network. Yeah, exactly. So you see the levels since the advent of social media, you see the levels of anxiety and depression, and I mean, many other things skyrocketing girls, as well as suicidal ideation, all that stuff. So,
That makes sense to me. That
right.
Instagram is the perfect weapon for a young woman.
Yeah, TikTok, Instagram, social bullying. That's why if so many people will say like, "Oh, I feel so anxious." And I'm like, get
Of
off social
course you do.
media. Right. Like,
And
how can you not, in a world that is flooded with information about who you need to be and what your value actually looks like, when your value is not in likes or butt pics or social status things like cars or whatever? I think it's like 25% of young people, when asked what they want to do, they want to be influencers. And I'm like, I get it, but what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? You want to get paid to have a lifestyle brand? I can speak to having gone on social media relatively early, like 2014-ish, and had pretty good success on there. But now looking back, seeing that I built a platform on a company that decides whether my platform is successful or not. So, there's a saying in social media that you built a mansion in someone else's backyard. And so I actually now see the relationship to Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and any of them. Twitter maybe less now, just by how it's working and how they're monetizing it. But is that it really is like an abusive relationship. Because if you say or do the wrong thing or don't produce the right dances and the right music and the right virality, whatever algorithm, then you will not experience success. And they give you just a taste of a viral video and then they take it away for a bit. These algorithms are perfectly built to tap into your behavior. They're like how slot machines are designed to reward you with dopamine. You have hundreds and thousands of social experts and psychologists who are their whole job is to fucking extract from you. And so I see this like pattern of abusive relationship that goes on. That's like, if you don't do the things the way we want, which we really saw also during COVID, then we're just going to take away everything you have. And so we have to be smart with how we relate to these things. And I say that in such hindsight of having experienced these things myself.
I mean, that's why I'm, like over the top stunned when people of any age are able to make even a little bit of progress in terms of their mental health journey or losing a little bit of weight or whatever it is, because I feel like corporations, I don't feel like it's true, corporations are pouring billions of dollars into focusing you elsewhere, into eating the shit, into keeping your head
Right.
in the phone. Like, so the fact that like, I feel like people are active, they have to actively fight against a well orchestrated, like, empire to,
And they all feed
keep
each
their
other.
sanity. Right.
Yeah. And the best thing you can do, there's a saying from Christ, and this is not, I'm not religious, but it's that to be in the world, but not of the world. To be able to decide how you're going to negotiate with these things. Obviously, beautiful things can be created from being involved in social media. Look at, we're connected, we're having this conversation. I have a podcast, same thing. And there are lines we can be extracted from. We can lose our energy. Like there was a point where I was experiencing anxiety and I was like, I never identified as someone who had anxiety. And all of a sudden I had so much anxiety and I realized it was because I was giving so much to this thing and I was experiencing so much psychological feedback from a million people
Yeah.
who during COVID especially were in a state of fear and anger and all the things, which is a rightful response, and are being constantly advertised to and sold to and extracted from. How can you not be fucking anxious?
Right.
Like it's the exact normal response to that situation. And we think there's something wrong with us, which is again the message we're sent from a mental health perspective. There's something wrong with you that you have anxiety or depression, as opposed to there's something wrong with the environment, which is the message of Gabor Mate's book, The Myth of Normal. Like
Right.
it is an act of rebellion to be healthy in a profoundly sick world, and I
Totally.
think what is we all understand that, and yet here we are. I when I was a rep, I remember watching Chris Rock's stand up where he says that the cure is in the money isn't in the cure, it's in the medicine.
Right.
And I remember thinking like, nah, I'm a rep, right? So I'm like captured by I'm being paid by the very system that monetizes medicine and not cures. And I'm thinking, no way a company would, if they could cure it, they would. But now I look and I'm like, that's definitely not true, because so many of the things that I learned about, and I think of like teaching people that fat is bad and cholesterol is bad. There's so much more complexity to that conversation. But if you look at when that dialogue came out, and these are all facts. When you look at when the dialogue came out about fat is bad, well, statins became available, which was the drug for them, and fat got taken out of most foods, and what got put in was sugar, which then created the diabetes epidemic. So, and then we have drugs for diabetes, and we have drugs for obesity, and we have drugs for cardiovascular disease, as opposed to seeing that food is medicine and life, relationships are medicine. And we need to reclaim ourselves to be sovereign in these systems, which is not to be absent of community, but actually to be in a community that respects sovereignty and whatever that means for each person.
Without me now putting this into an even bigger conversation because we're already at an hour, I will say, like, it's hard for me to not make the connection between I start the interview talking about, my curiosity about parenthood. We end talking about how the world is just kind of replete with sickness and suffering. And like, I have these ethical questions about bringing a child into a world
Right.
that feels like this, right?
Yeah, I understand that.
But I
And
guess people still do it.
well, I think the beautiful thing is if you're bringing mindful intention to everything you do, which you do, you're going to do it with children. And, the when two people consciously place that intention into bringing something sacred in the world and doing it in a sacred way, you bring in a future generation that is about the restoration of these things, and that's a gift. And,
Yeah.
and, I think it is normally human to be afraid of what this world can bring to our children and to us. And, if we lived our lives afraid of what is going to happen, we'll never get to create. And that's not to minimize the fear,
No, totally.
but to say,
Totally.
like, man, I could be afraid that this conversation is going to flop. And then that guide me never wanting to say anything that could be controversial or it could be
Sure.
whatever. Right. Which is very much people's experience today is
Yeah.
people are terrified of saying if saying COVID, even or gender or anything, right? These
Right.
conversations that are so actually essential because they're not binary. They're very, very complex, and
Yeah.
complex human systems require mindful conversations. And instead, we're eradicating dialogue. And so
Yeah.
I appreciate
Mm.
that you're having dialogue.
I appreciate you having dialogue, creating dialogue with me, I should say. I know you have a bunch of courses. What are some resources people might be able to connect with you through on? Where can I tell people to go?
Yeah, so you can go to createthelove.com, and under /courses, you can take a quiz for like what course is best for you. If you're going through a breakup, there's the breakup recovery course. If you're dating, man, this is the most popular course I have because I designed it in a way to turn dating, which mostly makes people anxious, into, or like, I'm done, there's no good people out there, blah, blah, blah. If that's you, no offense. But it's like, I was like, how do you take dating and turn it into the most healing process, and also where you get to demonstrate and experience your power. So you actually use the thing you're afraid of to become everything you've ever wanted to be. And that's, a pattern in all my courses is like, let's use this. But dating, man, can be the greatest vehicle, and you're on your way to find the person you want. So that's called Dating 101. And we actually do nervous system work in that one alongside the work of healing your past. What do you want to create? How do you create it? Let's do that. So it's 4 weeks. I have another one called Rediscover Your Wholeness. So if you're just in your own space and you want to step fully into who you are, it's about a self-exploration journey and reclaiming your relationship to your body, your mind, food, and self. And because I don't actually believe those are separate, and most of us find ourselves through one of those avenues. So I'm like, actually, I was saying earlier in the podcast, like, if one of your choices is not in alignment, you're not in alignment. So this is about just spending 30 days and committing to being in alignment. And what you watch people experience is total transformation, because they're like, holy shit, this is all I had to do. And you're like, yeah, it's all you had to do. And you feel better. So yeah, those are all available. I have a boundaries course that's a shorter course that's specifically on boundaries. Yeah, you can find everything there. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much, Mark.